What if I was to tell you this entire world had been put into a single block? It's true, because when you break it, another block takes its place, and I'm going to show you how I turn this one block into all of this. This is my 100 days in Minecraft 1 block. Day 1, I spawned into my new reality consisting of myself and a single block, and usually this is where people break the one block because there's nothing else to do. However, I found there was, and that was to walk off the edge down into the void. All part of my plan, because when you fall out of the world you get up to 3 recovery kits. And so by dying 3 times I managed to build my island to this without breaking a single block. But the one block did need to be broken, so we had to get down to business, and I was rewarded for my efforts. Wow. Some really great stuff here. Not long after that, a pig spawned into my world and we instantly hit it off. I'd go as far as say he's the most valuable thing I have in my life. Ooh, an oak sapling. He was the second most valuable thing I had in my life. A bit further on, I was taught my first lesson. Gravel would fall into the void. But, using my intuition, to follow the instructions on screen, we used the water bucket to swim underneath the one block and get another block in place. So now we'd get all the gravel. Pretty incredible stuff. Almost as incredible as this torch. Oh yeah, that's a good torch. Phase 1, the plains. I guess that first phase had been the tutorial phase. I wonder if anyone else had died 3 times in that phase. Well, in case a 4th death was to happen, I put my water bucket in a chest to be safe. Big news, I got a second sapling, and that called for island expansion to make space for another tree. And then, with nothing else to do, I went back to mining the regenerating one block, getting a melon, a pumpkin, and even a second pig, the 3rd most valuable thing I had in my life right now. But I didn't like their freedom, not one bit, so I made a space to imprison them to restore order. But mostly it was to prevent them walking off the edge. Deep down, they knew I did it out of love. Not the chickens, however. They were to be exploited and nothing else. The next day, I got a 3rd sapling planted, and a cow called Carl. He was going to become my partner going into the leather industry. Not that I told Carl that. I told Sammy the sheep who spawned in. She didn't find it funny. So I thought I'd tell the second cow that spawned in, but then figured it might be a bit close to home. Not long later, we were given the means to breed the pigs. A carrot, and almost as if it could be smelt, a 3rd pig appeared. Scary. One of our trees grew, and by the time I'd done punching it down, our other trees had grown too. But some of the leaves went over the edge, so I had to expand the island in case saplings dropped down into the void. Slabs also went around the animal pen in case I fall off when climbing over the fences. With 5 saplings now planted, we were starting to get somewhere, but this was only the beginning. I had big plans and spent the remainder of the day breezing through the rest of the phase until we got to the chest with hearts that were supposed to give better loot. If this was a regular world, I'd say no thanks, but up here in the skies, this was treasure. And that was phase 1 complete. We'd reached phase 2, the underground. Spooky stuff. I need a pickaxe moving forward, but I only went as far as mining 8 pieces of cobblestone. All so I could make a furnace for turning logs into charcoal to make torches. If I'm going to be making my island larger, it needed to be lighter, and I realise it's hard to appreciate the magnitude of that statement while the sun was still out. The next day I got birch saplings planted and continued to focus on island expansion. However, with it being day 4, I set up a shelter in case phantoms could smell the sleep deprivation emanating from my body. It was nothing short of a fortress. By this point, the birch had grown, and the saplings we got back from it cemented an infinite source of the new wood type. Day 5 was an interesting one. Most of the day revolved around tree chopping, but when night came, so too did our insomniac hunting friends. However, spending an entire night away in my shelter didn't sit right with me, so I pillared down under the one block to begin work on a second layer to the island, and I don't think they know I'm here. Surprised they did, but desperation was a powerful emotion, and being backed into a corner gave me the strength to pull through. Some might say I was on edge, but I'm a trooper and we had things to do. Mainly that consisted of mining the one block, seeing as we're playing Minecraft 1 block, where we came across iron, and then we were able to craft some shears, for giving the sheep haircuts, and using the wool to craft a bed. Your move, phantoms. I didn't even have to sleep, all I had to do was lie down for a second and I reset the phantom spawn counter. Checkmate is what I call that, and with peace restored I could build out over the void without worry. Day 7 I spent building the second layer of our island. happened. And day 8 building the birch staircases from this layer to our main platform, except I needed more birch wood, and that turned into a day-long tree harvesting session because of how slow wooden axes are and because I figured I could do with more wood in general. So it was day 9 the staircases were put in, with my shelter being in the way of one of them, but now with the power of a bed, it had become redundant. So apparently mobs spawn best at the bottom of the world. Point proven. So for when I had the means to build a mob spawner, I put in a laddered pillar to the bottom of the world for future me, and then build a crop farm closer to home. At this point my building, bridging and platforming had left me low on wood, and then guess what? More building took place. The animals needed to move. I was sick of the bleating in my ear holes while I mined the one block. For one of the pens I made the flooring mostly dirt, an expensive choice, even as going as far as putting our one and only grass block inside so it would spread and the sheep that were to be inside this pen could eat a well balanced diet. Only joking. It's so they'd regrow their coats for us to get a renewable source of wool. I don't care about their diets. However they do, and so I use the power of food to lead the undoubtedly starving animals into their new homes. After successfully moving the animals, I wanted to move the trees, but I couldn't use a piece of wheat to get them to uproot themselves to a new location. No, I needed to get my hands dirty, and the work continued all through day 15, until it was completed on day 16, and as you can see, I'd put a lot of thought into the design. However, the most important blocks, the dirt blocks, needed moving across, and with them having been put into the floor, I had to collect them before they dropped into the void, and I had a system with about an 80% success rate, which I hear is better than 79%, and know before you say we don't talk about 81% or higher. The next day I placed fences around the one block, which some might say is cheating, but I don't because it's playing smart, evidenced by these cute little bunny rabbits not being able to run off and jump off into the void, which isn't helpful to anyone, specifically me. Things like mushrooms I didn't have to worry about, they go where their stomachs take them, but with just having the one, feeding him would be a waste. His neighbours not so much. He looked so betrayed. But he got lucky because a second one spawned in, and now it was in my best interest to feed them for a child. I also fed a creeper my butter knife of a blade that took several swings to take down, leaving too much creeper juice on my sword, so I threw it out and punched the spider that spawned in next to death. What's that? You want me to come closer to the fence? Day 18. We got ourselves dark oak saplings. Hopefully we'd get enough back to get an infinite supply. It's my favourite wood type. We also got some more rabbits. And then some dead rabbits. And why are these being forced on me? Good news, our dark oak had grown, and we were able to get 3 more planted, an insane drop rate, but who am I to question the karmic justice of the universe? The next day I did a little more dark oak harvesting, and I think an infinite source of the wood type is guaranteed at this point. And you know what they needed? Their own layer at the tree farm, which the work continued throughout all of day 20, and with wealth being measured by the amount of dirt blocks a person owned up here, I was poor, but at least I got more rabbits. I'm surprised they didn't show up on a map we got with how many we'd collected at this point. Oh well, we reached phase 3, the Icy Tundra. Absolutely chillin'. I had to make the upgrade to an iron pickaxe. Gold ore was now appearing, and I was having to adopt the old peekaboo strategy to take care of the ice skeletons. And then a goat appeared, which on the surface seemed cool. It's a goat. We can do yoga together or whatever, but no, most of the time he got in the way. Like this, it had been about 20 seconds since he'd showed up and already I'm disliking him. And so when Arctic foxes showed up, I killed them because the mob camp for annoying mobs had already been filled. And to top off the day, it started thundering. I slept the rest of it away. Day 23. Cool looking chickens spawned in. See, why can't you be this cool? Now, in my limited time playing Minecraft, I'd picked up a trick or two, one of them being to get infinite dirt, but it relied on having gravel, because by combining both 2 gravel with 2 dirt would give 4 coarse dirt blocks, and by hoeing these 4 blocks they'd revert back to regular dirt, all of which went over to the tree farm, and it still wasn't enough. But it's okay because I got a dog I named Clive, and befriended Clive with the bones of my victims. The new pig variant I wasn't so fussed about. It looked like a dried out version of the regular pig, especially when stood next to the other pigs. Strays spawned in again, and although Clive wanted to rip them to shreds, I'd done the old Hassan Piker place training trick via an electro collar to keep him stationary, because this was my fight and my fight only, and as a reward Clive got a new friend, which was only half as exciting as when Preston the polar bear showed up. And don't worry, that firm hand that kept Clive in line was extended to our carnivorous friend. Kind of good I didn't get attached to the new dog, because Clive's new friend didn't see it past the monster party. What can I say? They party hard. That's how it goes up here in the sky. Life's a fickle business. And when a new animal shows up, you forget about the ones come and gone. Day 25, a quarter of the way through, and we got a few new visitors, including a couple more of these attention seekers, trying once again to upstage me and become the main characters of the world. But they weren't, because it's my video. But they wouldn't listen and insisted on getting centre stage. Clive thought they needed collars of their own. Advice maybe I should have taken, because ignoring them was almost impossible. However, I got spruce saplings, and that made everything temporarily alright. I was up at the tree farm on day 26 placing dirt, and even from a distance I could still see one of the goats trying to get back into the 1 block zone on the other side of the fences, which, speaking of, it provided a tasty chest with a singular ice block we were able to break for water, and then make for ourselves a Mr. Beast well for all of our future water needs. And then it was back to the tree farm to set up another layer, this one for spruce, though we didn't have enough wood. So in the meantime I went back to the 1 block and reached the ocean phase. Ocean phase, you hear that? You're not invited. In prep, because I'm a forward thinker, I widened the perimeter of fences around the 1 block, and underneath worked on a pool for mobs to drop into, assuming the ocean phase was going to spawn in water mobs. And with the laws of Minecraft physics, from our small pool we could create an endless sea of water if we so chose. I put fences around the outside so nothing could escape fall out of the sides, and then spent most of the next day gathering wood for creating another platform, this one at the bottom of the world, and you can tell a lot of thought went into the design because I was using dark oak instead of regular oak, and also made it out of planks rather than slabs. That's 1 block 101 right there I was breaking. What was I thinking? No wonder I only had enough wood to do the base of the mob spawner I'd been planning to make afterwards. I even spent all of my iron on 4 hoppers so I wouldn't have to manually collect any of the mob drops, out of both laziness and efficiency, but mostly laziness. Day 31, after several days of fasting, not my choice, theirs, I fed the animals, and then spent most of the day chopping down big spruce forsyths. It was enough wood to complete the spruce layer of the tree farm. Only big boy spruces could be planted here, and those big boys were providing the building materials for the mob spawner, because like most of what I build in this world, 1 block was all that's needed. And no, that wasn't a pun in reference to the mod pack. Fine by me, this is a serious survival situation. Aesthetics is a luxury I can't afford. It's this what we're after, pure unfiltered practicality. Now we had access to ranged weaponry, and by smushing them together they could be repaired. And we were pretty much ready to get on with the ocean phase. Stay right there, don't move. Aha! Can't believe you fell for that one, literally. And another, and I believe this is what's known as a hat trick. And this right here is what's known as a life saved. Not all heroes wear capes, but they do mine the 1 block. And wow, was this hero happy to see an axolotl. And he was happy too. He did this little dance, but it didn't last for long because the game could smell the fun in the air and spawned in the trident drowned. And by the time I'd taken him out, he'd snuffed out our little dancing friend. Why couldn't he have taken the goats out? On a brighter note, diamonds were now showing up. I stared at it for a bit inside of my inventory. That was about the highlight of my day. Although we did get tadpoles, I was able to move to our infinity pool with buckets. I didn't know if they'd naturally grow or if I'd have to feed them. Not a strong suit of mine. Kind of embarrassingly, the next day I'd forgotten to press record. Nothing much had happened other than I'd gotten a trident, pointed dripstone and some mangrove propagules. Also, the goats had vanished. I think they jumped over the ledge. I definitely did not kill them. I didn't know if mangroves had special conditions for growing, like only in mud blocks or something. I put them into dirt to see if that'd work, and hippity hoppity, we now had frogs that were my property. With us having suspiciously gained pointed dripstone, a farm needed to be made so we could ignore it and not use the dripstone for anything. One of the mangroves had successfully grown, proving to be a real contender for being the most awkward tree to chop down. The next day, the animals mobbed me like they hadn't had a meal in days. It was disconcerting having the rabbits hop towards me in unison. Maybe they were all starting to come together as a hive mind to take me out. Oh well, a problem for future me. Current me had added a birch layer to the tree farm. Back over at the dripstone farm, some of our stalactites had grown, and a chilled drown spawned that didn't attack. I felt bad about killing him, but what could I do? And a side note, never let anyone tell you exploiting the innocent isn't profitable. The frogs were starting to go down the same road as the goats had. You shall be the one I make an example out of. Let that be a lesson. Seriously? More nihilistic drowns spawned in, and after my last fiasco, all axolotls were put into buckets and shoved into a cramped chest. Now that's a life worth living. Still, sometimes it was lonely up here, so it was always nice to get a message from the mod creator. The next day, a wandering trader laughed at me for being poor, so I killed him. The guy had been all over the place, a completely careless chaperone. One of his llamas was even down at the mob spawner. With our new lead, I dragged the frogs along their stomachs to the other animals, and got a new shiny Pokemon. He died. Why does everything I love die? Day 44, I stopped by the mob spawner to restock on arrows. The lost llama was still there, and something I'd never noticed were their noses had creepy little faces on when you look closely. The evil creature was cast into the void. That had gotten me in the mood for animal killing, said every normal person ever. Even the rabbits. The ones that survived the purge were shaken up, but had a newfound appreciation for life. Apart from the chickens, they had been completely wiped out. It was their own fault for laying eggs. The sheep were the only animals left untouched, although I did strip them naked. I'd be glad once the mangroves had their own lair at the tree farm. They were beginning to get out of hand. Clive agreed, and he got a pork chop for sitting still for the last 20 odd days. What a spoiled pupper. It wasn't until the next day I did something about it, and with perfect planning I'd had enough mangrove wood to finish the layer. Oh boy, was I glad I'd planted some extra in case we hadn't. These trees were just so fun to chop down. The next day I got an Elder Guardian egg and another trident, maybe as a means to kill the Elder Guardian, but I wouldn't do that. Not because I didn't want to, but because we had something more interesting to do. A new phase, the jungle dungeon. So I filled in the 1 block zone over the pool of death, seeing as nothing survives down there, and got parents as our first passive. Don't know what Clive thought about them, he was probably too scared of an electric shock to show emotion, but I found with them I could transform myself into a pirate version of Blastoise. Don't sue me, Nintendo. I got an achievement for having traffic lights in my inventory. I am here, guys, but guess who wasn't? This ocelot who'd spawned in and did an absolute Houdini on me. I checked the death pool, but he was nowhere to be seen. I read it off as bad luck, but then returned to find him there. I then showed him my own magic trick. I call it Inescapable Boat. I made a small sugarcane farm with the limited 12 blocks of dirt I had to my name, the others already being in circulation. But you know what I didn't have to my name? Spare animal pens for the horses. I'm just a simple guy in the sky. You don't expect to get this sort of animalistic company I'd been getting when you're in a position like this. Still, it was finished by the next day, and you can tell how excited they were about it. Heck, it could be worse. You could be trapped in the inescapable boat. You'd think egg throwing would be fun. That's what I expected, but it got boring pretty quick. My storage was getting out of control. It's a jumbled mess and I was losing track of what I owned. So I was creating a new area that would become an extensive storage system where I'd easily be able to keep track of what I owned. But having an extensive collection of chests is rather wood intensive. But with tools like mine, I was moving at lightning speeds. No, I still don't have any money. It was an exorbitant number of chests, but remember, with the 1 block we had access to the entire spectrum of blocks. I even went as far as place item frames on the outside so I'd know at a glance what each chest contained. A first for me. I'm usually a sign guy. Although maybe I'd prematurely killed the majority of the cows because I hadn't enough item frames to even get to the halfway mark. I'd organised the best I could with the item frames available, and by organised I mean put all of the same items and blocks into their own respective chests each. As to the categorization of items and blocks in relation to each other, there was no organisation there just yet. And day 55 I transferred as many items as I could to what item frame chests we had available. The rest of the items would have to wait until we had more item frames. The dripstone farm was expanded slightly, and the next day we got a panda. He was amazing, but he was too big for a lead. However, I could trap him in a boat and then use the lead to pull both him and the boat. Minecraft logic. I feel like for the sizes, someone's being a little selfish with how much room they're taking up. That's a panda for you. There were also unfriendly faces that showed up in the form of little angry gargoyles and mossy skeletons that again wanted to fight with each other rather than acknowledge my existence. But we did get a new frog variety, these being more prominent jumpers than the last. Important information to know, their pen now looked more like a prison, and it was. And I've got to say, with no water and no freedom, it's hard not to love the place. We got another wood type in the form of a jungle sapling. I'd like to build a jungle layer at the tree farm, but I'm not holding out. The drop rate for these trees are atrocious, and a group of hitmen tried to stop me from growing my island, but apart from the vexes, there was nothing here to worry about. Got some more prisoner frogs that gave us the when the squad hops to town achievement. Yeah, we can call it the town where we're going, suckers. Day 58. Something I'd noticed were that all the mobs had this weird incessant interest with the one block. I mean, I myself felt the pull, so maybe I shouldn't blame it on them, but instead question why it was happening. It'd drive you to insanity. I even witnessed an ocelot jump off the side of the island after what it did to his mind, and worried that it had happened to a second panda that spawned in, put him in a boat next to the other, and noticed they had different faces, making me think that one was male and one was female. Not that it mattered, I was going to force them to procreate regardless. Yeah, and you too, buddy, you're not getting out of anything. I was pleasantly surprised on day 59 to get a couple of jungle saplings back from the tree we'd planted. It helped we were given a couple more in a chest. I was tempted to plant them into the 2x2 variant, but I didn't think we'd be likely to get 4 or more saplings back. More nail-bitingly was almost dying to a pair of witches. It was close, with half a heart remaining on my end, but a win's a win. However, my trousers had been torn off in the encounter, so I was having to take from those less fortunate, and I've got to say they really suited me. Day 60, I felt it was about time to move the pandas over to where all of the other animals were, though he was trying to start beef with Preston, so I made sure to put them by themselves. I also separated the Highland cows from the regular cows, not out of segregation, but so I'd be able to exploit both breeds separately. We don't discriminate here on this channel, we exploit evenly. By this point, the dripstone farm was due its semi-regular expansion, and much of the day was spent waiting around for jungle saplings to drop. I couldn't afford to let them despawn. Our efforts had gotten us to the point of 8 jungle trees. Not the only thing to celebrate, because I knew this bamboo would be appreciated by the pandas, though we don't have any dirt spare to plant any. It's a good thing they don't eat much, unlike this parrot that ended up eating half an entire stack of seeds. What a greedy son of a... I'd still take that over these guys. Phase 6, the Red Desert. During the last phase, I got cocoa beans and I stuck them onto the side of a jungle tree. The Red Desert provided us with a llama, and I'm telling you now, if he thinks I'm not going to partake in a spit-off to determine hierarchy, he's mistaken. But he didn't, because of the naturally high levels of testosterone oozing off of my skin thanks to the abnormally large doses of TRT I inject on the daily, and so he was rewarded with a 10x10 home of his own. The same courtesy wasn't shown for the undead boy band that showed up with their bleached blonde haircuts. And I was itching for a wandering trader to show up, now that emeralds were starting to show up. Dirt might be the normal means of measuring wealth, but in the desert we measure it with camels, and I was 1 camel rich, which according to the camel calculator is 85 short of what I'm worth. He'd be chilling over with all the other animals. Well, not with them, by himself, but he was within their vicinity. Nope, don't know what you're talking about, no guy worth 86 camels over here. News is travelling fast. Competition came in the form of a 77 camel worth villager the next day called Irina. Yes, I'd put their description into the camel calculator. Even Clive started dancing, he was so happy. Irina, if that's how you pronounce her name, was to be homed at the bottom of the world, close to our mob spawner, for no particular reason other than she might like to socialise with a zombie or two. However, as often experienced, I ran out of wood. Irina, you're going to have to wait a little longer. I did try to speed up the amount of time spent at the tree farm, going as far as using iron axes. What a maverick. And yet it still took all of day 66 to finish chopping the spruce forsyths before I was able to finish the platform on day 67. Now I had to get Irina from up there to down here. And I'll be honest, it would have been a heck of a lot quicker and easier to build a pool of water to fall into. Did I do that? No way, Jose. I wanted maximum amount of fun and an experience to tell the grandkids when I grow up. And what would you get that from? Quite simply, a log flume. And I'll be real with you, it took way more resources and time than it should have, didn't work all that well, and could be argued was a complete waste of time. But did we have fun? You bet we did. I could hardly hear myself think over the sounds of Irina's screams of joy. Although, as I thought about it some more, she might have been screaming because a stranger was forcibly taking her on the ride of her life. So I kind of just awkwardly left her at the bottom of the world all alone. Oh well, we had our Eve, now we needed Adam. I didn't expect him to show up without myself putting in the effort over at the one block. It's not a villager, but I'm going to welcome him anyway. Okay, still not a villager, but it's a step closer. Word must have got out that forced log flume rides were becoming a thing, and some people had problems with that. Now, I don't want to say it, but I've heard this creature here was worth about the same as my index finger. I wondered what this wandering trader spawn egg would be worth. Okay, I really need to stop talking about the camel currency. Day 76. Being spawned into a world with a guy who didn't want to buy our goods had led Judith, that's her name, into a state of existential crisis. I had to talk her off the ledge. How did I do that? Log flume ride, baby! And by the time we'd reached the bottom, despite both having severe whiplash, we'd had a tremendous amount of revelry. Isn't that right, Judith? Judith? My quest for infinite jungle wood wasn't going well, so I started a new quest for infinite acacia wood, and then got armadillos. I've got to say, the animal section was starting to feel like Noah's Ark having all these animal pairs. Well, apart from Preston. He still sat all alone. It could be worse, he could have been born a fox. I've got to protect the chickens, seeing as we had so few of them. We also got a new cow variant, who went in with the Highland cattle, once more having no pens available. And then a new chicken variant I hoped I wouldn't lose track of. Day 77, we had possibly the easiest monster party to date. Here, have a taste of your own medicine. You want some, buddy? Nah, I didn't think so. Another book and quill. Wonder what it says inside. Who am I to argue? Undine, however you say that name, the villager spawned. Now tell me, does this or does this not look fun? No, actually, on second thought, don't say anything. By the time we got to the bottom, I thought Judith the wandering trader had despawned. But what a prankster, she'd just been using an invis potion. Judith, you got me there, you absolute joker, you're just too funny to put into words. Although the next day I saw a different side to her when the two villagers were enjoying a quiet moment as the sun was setting, and Judith decided to go invisible next to them, watching. What a creep. And then myself, being watched by all of them, built their new home around them using birchwood, again as an elite design choice. For this build I was going to pull out all the stops for the villagers and make the place look as good as it possibly could, and I think we can all agree that I achieved that. And with a view like this, it's prime real estate. Day 79, it was feeding for breeding time, and Judith just watched the whole thing. No shame, she really was a creep. I left them to their privacy and went back to the one block, getting Judith's favourite animal, another donkey, don't ask me why. Talking of whom, her replacement, Linda, was sent in and gave me a red tulip. I'm only joking, I had to pay for it, so tight. The competition was mounting and another trader, this one towing llamas, showed up and got into a spit-off I was talking about earlier. From this one I bought beetroot seeds and flowers. However, that didn't change my position on staying here rent-free, and my conviction was rewarded by the universe with a couple of cactus at the one block. And they might to the untrained eye simply look like a couple of cactus, but to me, with a trained eye, they were the couple of cactus, if you know what I mean. And if you don't know, you don't know, what can I say? Oh, I know, how about here's a completely finished cactus farm 10 layers tall with 160 cactus going at a time. Well, that's what it would become. Currently they'd produced 1 cactus, so now we're up to 3 cactus, but we had time. Well, not really, only another 15 days after this one, unless we go to 200 days, press like if you want that. I checked in on the villagers, not for their well-being, but to see if there was an iron golem I could kill. And whilst down there I figured I'd build a drop shaft for quick descents to the bottom of the world. The log flume was great, it really was, and I don't regret building it, but until I fixed the issues of getting stuck every 5 seconds, its novelty had worn off. And here's a look at the solution for the time being. Also, I don't know if I've mentioned, but slimes sometimes spawn down here. They don't have much in the way of self-preservation. As for the donkeys, they were all about having fun, and I respect that. I checked in on the cactus farm and 4 had built up in the chests underneath. They went back into the farm. It's all about the law of compounding. Triplicate animals I'd been allowing to freely wander the island, however that freedom seemed to consist of getting in my way, so by my royal decree they'd taken that freedom away from themselves. Another boy band even showed up to sing about it, and put me in a good mood, so while I didn't trust these foxes one bit, I did trust my ability to imprison them, and just like that we'd reached the nether phase, ooh-wee. And that required a little bit of prep, seeing as my island was made fully of wood, and the nether had some flying flame mobs I wasn't a fan of. It was an architectural feat. On a side note, we now had 13 cactus growing at the cactus farm. Busy day number 88, I went ahead to see what the nether phase would throw at us, and it was a lot. Magma cubes that got a cheap sucker punch in on me, but they didn't realise they were up against the master of cheap shots, being safely on the other side of the fence. Though for whatever reason I chose to enter the pen and almost got sent to the shadow realm. I didn't make that mistake again. Gilded blackstone appeared, and I want to take this opportunity to say it's my favourite block in the game. Look look at it. Look at it. A blaze spawned in and had the potential to cause some real hassle, but with the way I handled it, the potential was never lived up to, and I was able to create a brewing stand from his soul. The game's first obsidian spawned in, and you know what that means, the first diamond pickaxe was forged, and to a high enough standard that a Celebrimbor would have been proud. It could even mine ancient debris, which, by the way, yummy. High maintenance pigs with no added benefits were thrown into the mix, and an extremely well suited chest for the nether phase. Just so well suited. As for the mobs that didn't want to kill me, there weren't many of them, and they looked like they were on death's door. I tied them to a post in the hopes that they'd get better. The biggest test of the defensive architecture came in the form of ghasts, the big boss of the nether, and I'd reduced it down to looking like a Pokeball. But out of everything, the most exciting thing was a lava bucket, enabling us 89 days in to finally get a cobblestone generator, turning the block from non-renewable to renewable. I'd even put a hopper and chest underneath so all the blocks would be collected instead of 40% of them being lost to lava. After a couple of minutes, I improved the design of the generator for a slightly higher output. And the thing is, this is the worst it's going to be. This design is only going to be improved upon. Over at the cactus farm, another 14 had built up, so you guessed it, they went back into the farm, doubling its output. And I thought I'd let you know I was intermittently chopping our acacia trees until we gained enough wood to make its own lair at the tree farm. Another Shaking Stevens turned up, just as ill, and went to the post with the others. I wondered if I could stack them all totem pole style like the two of them already were. In another situation at another time, this dude could have killed me. Instead, he turned into a zombified piglin and I killed him to put him out of his misery. How was I feeling after that ordeal? Great, we were still getting ancient debris. And just as good, another 2 blaze rods in a chest, meaning we could make splash potions of weakness. I think you can probably tell where this is going, but I wanted more gold for apples. The solution? Head to the nether, and was spit out straight into skeleton spawn paradise. Not a good biome for finding gold, but great for dried ghast. And yeah, while I was here I took some bone blocks. I don't want to hear anything about only being able to take blocks from the 1 block, because if the mod creator didn't want you to use the nether for resource gathering, they would have prevented you from doing so. Back in the overworld on day 93, the dried ghast was shoved into the infinity pool, and I went back into the nether to gather more blocks that weren't gold. I also showed why I was an absolute menace on the tennis courts, and yes, I do bring a bow and arrow to the sport of kings. I also found another 2 dried babies and called it a day on the nether to put the gravel to use doing the coarse dirt trick, getting for ourselves another 2.5 stacks of regular dirt by the next day. I wasn't the only one having fun. Linda was loving life in the log flume. She wasn't getting very far, bless her, and all of the dirt went over to the tree farm. Yes, dirt was still needed for the place, and I still ran out. By the time I'd gotten back to the main platform, it was raining and our striders had died. Technically it was the bad weather that killed them, but deep down I knew their death was a result of my ignorance. And so on day 95 I made a monument in their memory. I didn't know them for long, hadn't paid them any attention, but they'd be remembered. I used mangrove wood for the signs to symbolise the blood on my hands, and under a crying, thunderous sky I went to sleep. And felt great the next day with the cactus farm beginning to pick up, and while we'd lost some residents, new life was flourishing. I almost freaked out until I spotted the giant smile on his face. So what did I do? Saddled him up and chased him around. Cover me in arrows and call me an airbender, I was flying. Flew down to the villagers to showcase my elite status, and killed an iron golem to cement that fact. It's just a good thing they didn't see me chasing after my ghast outside the wall. It would have been undignified for a man of my position to be seen doing that. No, they only saw the cool way I flew back up into Team Rocket territory. Being my official mount, I let the ghast roam free, and with me now knowing it was possible, shoved the other 2 dried ghasts into hydrate. Day 97, it was time for some transformations. Our 2 subjects, none other than a couple of volunteers from the villager breeder, agreed to the experiment. No, not Irina or Undine, they were our OGs. You think I'd put them through something like this? A 3rd volunteer came from the mob spawner, and I brought them together for a chat, you could say. And about 30 seconds later, that chat was over, and oh what? We had a couple of zombie villagers. Oh no, what a horror, what a surprise, what a shock. No, I can assure you I didn't have these potions ready for a situation like this. this, but I will say on hindsight I wish I'd separated them into their own boats, and you'll see why soon. While I waited, I got on with other things, like saying hello to a couple of sufficiently moist guests. It was later in the day I got the notification of Zombie Doctor, and I knew the villagers were cured, so you can imagine my surprise when I saw they weren't. However, you remember when I said moments ago I should have separated them? Well, this was why. What I'm assuming happened was that one of them cured before the other, the second zombie villager then turned the newly cured villager back into a zombie villager, then the second one cured, and the newly converted zombie villager turned the second villager back into a zombie villager, putting us back to square one. Not even a little smiley gas could cheer me up, and so I spent the rest of the day feeling sorry for myself over at the cobblestone generator, and it gave me time to think. Life goes on. I couldn't remain down in the dumps. I had a responsibility as creator and caretaker of this island, and so back in the Nether I mined down, not for ancient debris, but for gravel and gold, which kind of sounds like a George R.R. Martin book. Both will be needed in 200 days, not the books, the gravel and gold. As long as you've liked the video, that is. I feel stupid for including this, but it had to be tested, as I'm certain I'd read that blast furnaces could turn gravel into sand. Well, they couldn't. That was fake news. This is why fake news is dangerous. And here we are, rising on a beautiful day 100. With only the one day left, I didn't commit to anything large, just did bits around the base, keeping busy and reflecting on our journey to this point. We'd come a long way from our singular block at the centre of the world, and by the time the sun rose on day 101, I'd enjoyed our last day of the video, but not the last day of this world, as long as you like. Alright, bye.